can copy this over.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education for its work session for November the 3rd, 2022 to order. To the board and those in the audience, both here and live streamed. This meeting is being live streamed through the Wilson County Schools YouTube channel. The public can also view the meeting through links on the Wilson County Schools Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages, and the Wilson County Schools website. Members of the board, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell,
I move that we approve the agenda for the November 3rd, 2022 work session of the Wilson County Board of Education.
Second.
it has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that the work session agenda for this Board of Education meeting be approved. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Members of the board, we are in this work session to deal with our facilities issues as we have met jointly with our Board of County Commissioners, and this meeting was set for a prior date that had to be changed, and so we are here today to get updates and to do some long-range planning. If you recall, the county commissioner said, give us your proposal, we'll give you the money. My comment to them was, thank you very much. We'll get your proposal, and when we submit it to you, we're going to look to get the money. So we are here to do the work that we need to do. I do recognize one of our county commissioners, Mr. Chris Hill, who is visiting with us as we go about our discussions today. So I'm going to turn this over now to Dr. Mills or Dr. Williams, whomever is leading this charge at this point.
Start with CPL. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the first part of the meeting, we have Mr. Graham Boyd from CPL, and he was just going to come and give an update of the track project at Hunt High School, what that looks like, and just go over any questions that we may have and take a look at designs.
Okay.
Do the other one too, Graham.
You can take the flash drive out and then just put that other little one in there. Thank you. And if you just run the presentation, the PowerPoint, it'll.
Off your drive.
No, yeah, if you just hit right next to the Zoom and the bomb to start the actual presentation, I should be able to click with this. I think so.
Go for it.
There we go.
There you go.
All right, let's go back. go. I appreciate y'all giving me a little bit of time today. I'm Graham Boyd, CPL. We're doing the Hunt High School Athletic Renovations Project for ADA upgrades as well as the new track. And if you would like, you can either look at the screens, or I've also put a package in front of you with it printed out so you can see some of the, when we get to the end, it gets small font and numbers and stuff like that. So this is just a quick look at the existing concession building and what it will look like with the new track, the new fencing around the track, the upgraded ADA accessibility, the current conditions there. As I'm sure you're all aware, the track is falling apart. There's no space between the concession stands and the actual track. It's only 6 lanes, so we're upgrading that to be 8 lanes to be comparable to Fike and Bedingfield as well. This is a quick look at the floor plan for the concession building, where we're doing a general interior overhaul, refresh, new flooring in the concession building. A lot of the equipment will stay. It's actually in pretty good shape. There will be an alternate for a new fan in the Ansel system, just because that's old. The Ansel system looks like it's in good condition. There will be also an alternate, like we did at Bedingfield, for a new ceiling and new light fixtures. So once we get those bids, we can talk about pricing and what we can afford and what we need. This is just a quick look at the elevations of the concession building. We had a really productive meeting this week with some of the representatives over at Hunt High School, the coaches for football, track, principal. We talked about branding and logos and just making sure that the look stays within their image and likeness. And so here on the east facade of the concession, you can see that big warrior head, as well as keeping the Mojo Grill nomenclature above the serving counters. One thing you will note, the existing serving counters there are pretty high, and that doesn't meet ADA, so we will be lowering that down to be the correct height for ADA, and we'll be replacing those with coil roll-up doors instead of the old wood kind of shutters that they had. Looking over at the restroom building, again, we're providing ADA walkways from the spectator seating to the concessions and to the restrooms. We're adding, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Well, where we have women and men designated, we're adding visibility walls like we did over at Bedingfield. That way we can get the ADA clearances within the door of the restrooms. And just looking at that floor plan, very similar in the actual restrooms to Bedingfield. We're able to keep the toilet count the same based on our discussions with not only the AHJ, but also with the fire marshal, both at Bedingfield and at Hunt. So that allows us to keep the plumbing fixtures where they are and just change the stalls to create ADA stalls on the end. And then again, we'll do an alternate pricing for replacing those fixtures. That way we can kind of gauge how much that is costing as part of the overall project. Hunt has a really nice sports medicine room currently already. That had just gotten flooring redone recently. So while we will have the alternate for a new ceiling and new light fixtures there, we're going to put notes in there to make sure that that floor doesn't get messed up while they're doing the work in that room. And this is just looking at the exteriors of that restroom and sports medicine building. A little bit of identification on the south side with that sports medicine. And then as a majority of the spectators will be coming from the parking lot on the north, that's where we're going to put some of the graphics on the north side of that building. Looking at the site, so Hunt has a little bit of a different configuration, obviously, than Bedingfield. So we will be adding a decent amount of concrete site work and sidewalks. And if you see actually looping around the north side or the left side of the track, we've actually got a concrete walkway all the way around to the visitor side. I've identified that, or we've identified that as a potential alternate, so that way we can decide if that's too costly to provide a full sidewalk out of concrete, then we can do it in just gravel to the visitor side. Because again, we're doing all the ADA spectator seating. It's tough to see this, but all the ADA spectator seating will be right next to the home visitors on a pad, which is similar to what we did at Bedingfield, where we'll have wheelchair spaces as well as companion seating next to it. We also have, so we'll be looking at, there's about a 10-foot elevation change from where the field play, or where the playing field is at to where the parking lot is at. And so one of the things that you can see on kind of this northeast side going up to the parking lot, we will have a sidewalk going all the way up to the parking lot. The existing sidewalk isn't ADA, so we'll be replacing it with a 1-to-20 slope, which doesn't require a handrail. It's a nice gradual slope. But we'll be, as soon as we get the final topo survey, we'll be finalizing exactly the path of that, so that way we make sure it's within that 1-to-20 ADA slope. This is just a little bit more of a detailed look of the track design as it is right now, going against that 8-lane. Where the field and the track are located at Hunt is tucked back in the kind of the back part of the property, where there's a stream going through on the northwest side, so the bottom left here. And so it gets kind of tight down there with the existing grades, but we're working really hard on trying to limit the disturbance beyond the existing fence line into that stream area, to try and keep, I know there's a cross-country trail that kind of loops back around behind the fence, and that was one of the big points of discussion with the track coach this week, and making sure that we still give a cross-country path for the kids to be able to use that. So that's one of the things that we're working through. And then as far as the triple jump, high jump, all of that will be now located on the inside of the D, which is similar to what we have now. We're just cleaning it up. We'll have new concrete put around there for those runways. And then we'll be doing a new high jump area over where the existing one is. It'll be all new and meet regulation size for high school athletics. Taking a look at the opinion of, or I guess, let me take one step back. Before we talk about the opinion of probable costs, are there any questions about the design that we've looked at so far?
Yes. Let's go back to the restroom area, please. Now, did you say that the flooring is already good there, so you're gonna do a temporary cover on that to protect those floors?
Just the sports medicine.
Just the sports
Yep,
medicine.
the bathrooms are just painted concrete, so we'll be
Okay.
replacing those with the epoxy flooring like we did at Bedingfield, which actually will match what has already been done in the training room.
Okay, well, with the bathroom, and you have the same number of stalls
Yes, ma'am.
and the same, are you doing low toilets, or are the toilets gonna have enough of a rise? If you've got public coming in to use the bathroom, and you have persons with mobility issues, and if all of your toilets are low, are you going to put handrails or something?
There will
in
be
each of
guardrails
those?
on the ADA stall, yes.
And
guard.
how many of the stalls will be ADA?
So-
Particularly when you deal with women, okay? You've got more women trying to occupy a little bit of space. And when you have one toilet or two toilets, and everybody knows in the handicap stall, you've got high toilets. And so everybody's trying to get in there, and that person that's handicapped can't even get in because everybody else trying to use it. Are you having any kind of accommodation for the remaining toilets, so that at least when you put the toilets in at one time, can you give all the high toilets?
We can do,
And what kind of price differential does that make?
I think it would be minimal price impact on the height of the toilet. But we typically have the ADA height toilet as our typical toilet across the board.
Okay, so all of them are
Yeah,
going
so
to
that way
be,
they're all the same
Okay.
height toilet. There's no up or down, and obviously no like if this was an elementary school and in the lower wings, we'd be putting in the really small ones for the kids. We don't have any of that here.
Wonderful, okay.
And now, if you really wanted, our stalls, because of the spacing of the existing toilets, generally, our stalls are a little bit wider than they would need to be, or they would be typically if this was a brand-new construction. And so what we could do is potentially create an ambulatory stall, which is a pseudo stall between a full ADA stall and a typical regular old stall. It's generally 3 feet wide, and it has just your horizontal rails on either side. So we could add that to a second stall if you'd like.
I don't know, I just have a concern that I'm leaving that to you all, to Mr. Letchworth and maintenance and whomever. But women have a few other issues that men don't have, and that's why I'm bringing up the height of toilets and the necessity to make sure that the consumer that's coming into our games have some modicum of comfort and not having to struggle to use the bathroom facilities.
Yes, ma'am. We could definitely, I'll take some notes and go and look, and it's probably a minimal cost to add a secondary stall with ambulatory rails.
Well, if you're telling me that all the toilets are going to be the same height, then it may not be an issue, but that's not my forte, so that's why I'm saying you all can have this discussion to help facilitate, but if you don't know the issue, then you can't try to address it.
Yes, ma'am.
So, okay.
We'll talk about that a little bit more.
I've got a question.
Mr. Boykin?
With the concession building, do both of the windows need to be lowered for ADA
That was one thing that
accessibility?
we talked about. So technically, both of the openings don't need to be lowered down to the ADA height. It starts to become a visual thing where you've got one up. Either way, we have to replace the wood sill that's there, and we'll do a stainless steel wrap like we did at Bedingfield. So it just becomes an aesthetic thing for somewhat of a minimum cost. We're already installing a roller shed, a new coil door, so now you're gonna have two different size doors, two different size openings. Sometimes it's easier to just have the contractor do the exact same thing in both openings.
All right. Are y'all doing anything with the roofs on these buildings?
Nothing is in the scope for the roofs.
Has there been assessment done on the roofs?
The one at Hunt on the grill is a little bit older than the one on the bathroom facility. I've got the dates at the shop, I don't have them, but we never installed.
All right, because, these are buildings that aren't used on a daily basis. So if they were to develop a leak and we've just remodeled the inside, that kind of puts us back at having to remodel again. So, I'd like to see that, at least looked at. And, the path that goes around to the visitor side,
Yes, sir.
is that a concrete path or is that gravel?
Right now, it's concrete. What we've talked about doing is base bidding it as gravel and then add alternate as concrete, so that way we can get a price on it and decide if it's not required to be concrete. And so we want to be able to have the contractor price that out for us and decide if we want, or if we feel the need to have that be concrete.
Ms. Boyer?
One comment on that, but if you were handicapped, then you could not get to the visitor side if it was gravel. And that is the area where all the washing and
It becomes the low spot on the site, yeah.
yes, the lowest, okay, thank you so the concrete would be much better than gravel.
So is there a way that we could utilize the track itself as the pathway?
We talked about that a lot, and it's not off the table, but you know, we started getting into discussions of durability with the brand-new track you just finished and starting to have people, and it's not necessarily the people walking to the bleachers that is problematic. You can set up temporary barriers on the track every single weekend or keep them set up in the fall for football and for all the different sport activities there. Problem is that when people are walking with gum and Coca-Cola and their hot dog and they're dropping ketchup, and that's where our track consultants, and same thing with Beddingfield, we recommended putting a fence right around the track. Let's protect our brand-new track that we just put down. Let's keep it for the athletes, the student athletes, and keep the spectators off of it. We looked at this pretty hard, Mark and Greg, with the tight elevation change in that northwest corner. We looked at, okay, what if we cross the track right outside of the concessions and do a sidewalk across the inner D, which is kind of right where the pole vault is, and then we'll cross the track again. That way we can keep the walkway around the outside. We don't need it. We can deal with the elevation change. And just the more we looked at it, you start to introduce spectators back onto the field, and that's what we're trying to limit. We're trying to keep that fence around the track, keep the spectators off the field, so there's limited interactions between visitors or spectators and the student athletes. And so that's kind of what our goal was, to kind of let the spectators stay outside of the fence. Don't give them the opportunity to, oh, I was walking and then all of a sudden I'm right by the end zone. So.
Other questions, comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
I agree with Ms. Boyette about the concrete. I think we'd be far better off seeing how we know who's going to be needing to use it. And I also agree with keeping spectators outside the fence.
And that's why we're doing that as a price, or as an alternate price, so that way, as soon as we get the bids back, we can sit back down and say, okay, that was only, I think I put a rough number to it. Going from gravel to concrete on that walkway is probably in the magnitude of $15,000 to $20,000. I put $15,000 here. But I'd rather have a contractor say, it's gonna cost me this much more to add the concrete there, and then we can sit and say, that's definitely worth it, let's do that. Now to talk about the ADA spectators, what we talked about doing at Beddingfield and also the plan here, as far as legal ADA spectating location, we are providing a 40-foot by 15-foot pad that's over between the home grandstand and the concession. That fits all of our ADA spectators for the entire facility. So the concrete sidewalk around the visitor side is not necessarily a legal ADA issue. It's an access amenity, if you will, making it easier.
I have a question, I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the track itself, what is the little square? The reading is hard for me to be able to read. What is that exactly in the little?
The red?
That's the pad.
That's the high jump area.
Okay.
So it's a 61 by 61 square of track material where the high jump
Okay.
events take place. And now, so it's not necessarily shown here, but where the shot put is currently, it'll be replaced in the same location. That's part of the scope, as well as the discus pad, which is also a little bit east, plan north, or page north, top of page on this view in that practice field. So those will also be replaced as part of this project.
Other questions?
So I can give you just a quick overview of the cost estimate, and we had Palacio Collaborative come in and do a opinion of probable cost looking at our 75% design documents, and then I actually vetted that based on the bids that we got out a year or earlier this year at Beddingfield, and so I would be unwise if I said I feel super confident the way the market is with pricing, but I do feel that we've got a pretty good opinion of probable cost here as far as the track pricing and the concession and restroom building renovation. We've got a pretty good handle on what that costs us out at Beddingfield from earlier this year and where the market is. And then we have a little bit of escalation and contingency in this opinion just to try and make sure our budget is in line with what bids come back at. And then, again, we'll be using those alternates to kind of make sure that we are within budget, and then we can look at what is the higher priority items that we need to have here.
What do you mean when you say you're gonna sod all disturbed areas?
So our cost estimate consultant came in and just took 100,000 square foot of sod. And when I went back and looked at how many square feet we actually probably need, it's probably more like 60,000. And that's why I added that to the possible alternate list, because in reality, we'll have in the contract documents, once we get to 100%, we'll have a square footage for the takeoff that'll be more accurate. That's kind of where we're at. When we're at 75% design, they guessed 100,000, or they estimated 100,000 square feet, and I estimated it's probably gonna be closer to 60,000 square feet. And that's just where the areas are disturbed around the buildings, around the track. We're trying to limit, and I was telling the coaches earlier this week, with schedule and with football season, we're trying to limit the extensive construction to sideline only. Don't go over that sideline into the field. So that way the new sod is really just on the sidelines and not on the actual playing field. You know, and it's easier said than done when the contractor's out there. But for the most part, we're trying to limit it to just the drainage and the track.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Boyer?
What about the scoreboard? Is it going to have to be moved?
This scoreboard will need to be relocated just because since we're going to 8 lanes, it'll be a 100-foot radius on this track. And so it gets larger on the north and the south side. So we have an allowance in here for relocating the scoreboard.
Other questions? All right.
This is just a little bit more of that backup data for the track, the 1.3. And then just, want to talk about schedule. So we started this in August. We've condensed our design phase down by about 3 months. Now, we've learned a lot at Beddingfield. Beddingfield has had its own hiccups. But what we're trying to do here by presenting this at 90% design, not completely 100%, and then pushing to get this project out to bid, to get bids back in 2022. Our plan is, and I'll be working with Mark and also with Brandon to get the contract ready. Once we get the bid back, we have the apparent low bidder. We want to get the contract set so that way when we come to y'all on the 9th of January, it's contract in hand instead of this is the recommendation of who the bidder is, and then waiting another 2, 3, 4 weeks until we get the contract with them, and then we issue the NTP. So we're trying to condense everything down so that way we're giving the contractor the best chance of completing this before the football season, and we don't end up in an issue where students unfortunately don't get to play their senior season on their home field. We don't want that to happen again. We want to get it right and give the contractor every advantage to get it right this time. Now, one thing I will say that I didn't write in this one, I'm waiting back. I've got my surveyor was out there this week. I need him to get me, I've been calling him every day, he's been great, but I need to get that survey information back next week in order to stay on the set going out by the 17th. So right now, that will be the only thing that pushes it, and if it does push it, we're talking about at most a week, just so I can go back and make sure that our elevations are all correct, all our drainage is there, and we cross all our T's and dot all of our I's.
Okay, this is a proposed schedule, but in this time and era, we have a lot of things on supply chain issue, and we understand that timelines may change. Are you factoring in anything about
We're giving a
supply
little
chain?
extra construction time based on where Beddingfield had been, and I know that some of the major issues they've had from a supply chain delays, those are one of the very first things we will be discussing with the new general contractor on this project is get the submittal in for these three things, and any additional things that you're seeing in the market, let's get those approved, let's get those ordered, so that way they don't become an issue down the road. So we've learned a lot as a team through this process at Beddingfield, and we're trying to take all of those lessons learned and make sure that we don't have any of those continuing into this next project.
Well, even though you say, you're trying to have completion so that the students have the advantage of their own home field turf, if that does not happen, then the schools will have to do whatever rescheduling. I know that Beddingfield ended up, Barton graciously let them use their field for their homecoming and things like that. So this is the hope for, but I think that each of the schools have to consider alternates in case this timeline is not adhered to. Certainly, we want all of the students to be able to have that home field turf advantage, but life happens and it gets in the way sometimes.
Yes, ma'am, and that will be one of the first meetings we hold with the general contractors team when we have their initial schedule laid out. Again, this is our design schedule, and this is us giving a pretty good window of construction, and this will ultimately be worked out contractually with the substantial completion and final completion, but we'll be meeting with the AD, both for Hunt as well as the district AD and the coaches, to really talk about that in January, not July.
Yes.
Back at your cost estimate, we kind of jumped over that page. I might have anyways. Tree removal. How many trees are you intending on taking down?
I don't have an exact number of trees for you, but we are extending the track north and south close to 6 feet. And then you've also got the walkway, whether it's gravel or whether it's concrete. You've got the safety aisle outside of the track before the fence. And then you've got the new fence that will need to go in. So it's really that first run of trees on the north and the south side, which currently, up until about a week or so ago when they were trimmed back, I mean, they were just dropping leaves and everything on the existing track, just, weathering it that much worse. So there will be a little bit of tree removal anyway with this new construction phase and new track, but we don't really want the drip edge over the new track anyway.
Ms. Boyer?
The contractual language that you were talking about, let me ask it in plain English. It is crucial to my opinion and the community input that I've received that it is ready to go for football season. Whew, yes, big deal. So will the contract say that if it is not done, that they're going to have significant financial issues?
Yes, ma'am. I will be working with Brandon to make sure that we are handling it from a responsible, again, I'll be working with Brandon hand in hand on that. We know how important it is to make sure that we get this project done on time. And like I said, we're trying to do everything we can on our end up front to set the GC up for success.
And I really, really hate that Beddingfield had to go through that. That was,
I agree.
Never even thought about it. But for their students, I know paying at Barton was a nice plus, but I really hate it for their season. I regret that it happened.
Ms. Barnes?
I have a question. I kept hearing you throughout the presentation saying
lessons learned from Bedingfield? Is that from a contractual view?
It's an overall view.
So in other words, Bedingfield, we're completely done with it. Anything that you've learned, a lesson from, I guess, did anything need to be repaired or fixed from a
It's not,
contractual?
there's no issues from that standpoint. It's just from a timeline and setting things up and thinking ahead. And when I say even lessons learned, it may be as little as, okay, I know the catch basins were a supply chain issue. I know. Maybe our new GC thinks that, we've heard rumblings, but they're fine. But having that discussion up front and communicating, hey, this is what we just dealt with last summer. Let's get that ordered, let's get the submittal in, let's approve it, let's not have that issue become an actual timeline delay issue.
That is my say.
So are we having to use risk management as we're doing with the Watt construction and as we've talked about Frederick Douglass with this project, or you all are responsible with that general contractor and whatever?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
You don't have that for this.
You don't have that for this, okay, all right. Thank you. Other questions? All right. So where do we go from here? This was just an update, giving us
This is an
the
update.
plan.
It's so long as
Cost.
there's no issues or anything. I do have a few notes that I'll go back and work with Mark and his team on, but our plan is full speed ahead. Let's get this out to bid. Let's get a partner GC on board, and let's get construction done so we're ready to go for football this coming fall.
All right.
Is the funding for this gonna have to be additional funding requested from the county? Because it looks like it's gonna be 4.11, or 4.2 million dollars.
Go back to the slide. So
Because it's 2.8 for construction and then 1.3 for the track.
No, it's 2.875 is the opinion of probable cost all in, including our soft costs, my design fees, as well as the track and the renovation and all the sidewalk work. So the 2.3 is if we do not do the alternates, which part of the alternates is Musco Lighting or a lighting vendor doing the lighting. So that will have to be worked out, but that is an alternate, so that way we can price it as such.
And I met with Ms. Steinagel and Mr. Hunt to just kind of touch base on some projects and share with them that number so they can go ahead and share with the commissioners that's a general estimate of where we are, because again, we don't have bids back, and she said that was fine. So that number's been shared based on what we've got right now.
Okay.
All right. So this is one proposal that goes so that they're ready to,
At this point, that's all you have to share is that total opinion. And it was clear among all of us that was a best estimate of what we have now until bids come back in, and that was a placeholder.
okay,
And Ms. Steinagel and Mr. Hunt were great with that.
all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, what's your? See what those goodies.
So the next on our agenda is the long-range facility planning for the system.
Bring those down.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, go ahead. I've got some handouts, board members, that'll go along with the slides.
Let's just go together. I'll give them away. I'll take another one.
Thank you. Too many papers passing.
Teachers out here. Pass out paper. Where's your student helper?
I think I'm supposed to be the student helper. I don't know that I've done a good job.
So what I passed along first?
You're
Should I
good,
hear- I'm
you're good, you're good.
Thank you.
So, we've met a couple times before and, gone through some, data and projects. I just wanted to catch up and do a few things today. I wanted to give you a quick review of some current projects. You know, we had just had the Bettyfield track and Hunt track when he was talking about, when Graham was sharing, he shared a little bit about Bettyfield, but also about the Hunt track was the biggest one. I want to share a quick review of some current projects. And then, I wanted to go back and revisit some of the facility issues we talked about because we need some direction, or we've got to have more discussion about some of the issues we're dealing with now that we've had another conversation with county commissioners. And then I want us, before we leave, to schedule our next meeting, and we need to continue to have meetings to stay on track based on the conversations that we had that involve future funding as we work through some of the consolidations or renovations and the process. So that's about as fancy as it's gonna be today, but I wanted to tell you where we were with Frederick Douglass. You know, yesterday we went through the new Watt building, some of us went through there, and if you had a chance to do that, Ms. Boyette, Mr. Mercer, who else was here? Mr. Boykin, went through and had a chance, and some of us, the board members, went through earlier as well. And so you see what that process looks like and how beautiful that is, and what the funding and support can provide for us. And that project is on track. Thanks to Olivia for coming in and publicizing that, taking what we hope are great pictures. We'll see, because we all look great. We all look great in those hard hats. So that is on track, and so what we want are some other projects like that. And so with Frederick Douglass right now, we've got an architect selected. You've done that. The RFQ, Ben and his folks have worked with Brandon with Pointer Sproul, and that will be posted for the CMAR process to begin, so we can present you proposals at the November meeting. And then you can have review of vendors and the selection sometime in December. So that means before we go home for break, we can have a CMAR chosen for the Frederick Douglass project. And so they'll be in place as part of the process of planning with the architects, which is what you want. And as you can see yesterday, for those of you that toured and the other tour, that Barnhill was working with our architects at Watt, and that process has really made a huge difference for what we have to work with, and then also with the Holt Brothers Construction, and the whole Watt process has been very, very smooth and very integrated. So Skinner, Farlow, and Kerwin have begun work on the design documents, and what we're estimating is that the demolition of the current Frederick Douglass, it can happen in July, this coming summer. And once that starts, you know, we've already begun work on Toys Not to make the transition and do that. So all that nothing will be happening with student transfer or notification and all till the school year's out. We can manage all that communication, and we'll work through transportation and all those things that, much like we did this past year with Toys Not Winston, and that went very well for a very compressed time frame. But all that will take place after the school year, but all that is on go right now. The renovations to Barnes and Lee Woodard, you know, we shared some of that with you. That should be completed by December at the latest. A lot of it's being finished up now. We're just waiting on some of the actual materials to come in on a few things. And I've had conversation with the county manager and assistant county manager, and with our maintenance staff and Dr. Williams. The remaining funds for each school will be used to address lead abatement issues in those facilities. And that was based on the funding that the county received and how they structured it. So we will go in and work on those as is applicable with students in or out of the building so that we can address it appropriately and continue on with that work. But those renovations are on track. Questions on those so far? Okay. The items from the field trip that we're still calling it with the county commissioners, that's the easiest way to remember it. If you remember, we had that discussion just recently. The architects are preparing some general estimates for those projects. That's $2 million in funding from the county to begin work on those projects. We know there's gonna be more to that. Your priorities were, safety vestibules was main priority, but we also knew that the renovations could take place quicker because some of that work could start while school was in session, and then the science lab. So all that's gonna come together, and we'll bring that back to you once we get the information from the architects. And then finally, the new Watt, I just put that in there. That is on schedule for completion early February. The move will take place during spring break for Watt. That is a tight timeline. I did check into whether or not we could use the following week for remote instruction if we needed it, and the answer is no, unless there's inclement weather. I feel a snowstorm coming on,
Don't be that guy.
but I can't be that person. Yeah, you're right, thank you. And so I won't do that. But anyway, we think we can do that, and we're making arrangements so that will go smoothly. So that's kind of our current projects as we go.
As a sidebar,
Yes, ma'am.
I had to put my glasses on because it looked, the dollar sign in front of the 2 million looked like 52 million, and I'm going, wow. I know it's not 52 million.
Please don't say that, no,
Please don't write that.
no.
No. Just funny.
So what I wanted to share today was just for discussion, and bear with me, are some things we've talked about in the past or have come up in conversation, and I just want to revisit them with you. But I think we need to move forward on some of these items to be prepared for what we need to do next with facilities and from what the conversation was with the commissioners and with our needs to request additional funding, if that makes any sense. So we have talked about student assignment, and we closed Winstead and Toys Knot, and that was in plans as we looked at for the new Frederick Douglass, and the commissioners have talked about a possible new elementary school, a second one. So I've got that later on to talk about. So I don't think there's any need right now to address attendance boundaries for the elementary and middle schools. We just reduced one at elementary, reduced one at middle, and we've got these other things coming on. If we look at another one, all that can wait a little bit. But we really do need to consider looking at our high school attendance boundaries. Okay? I think, and staff think the same way as we're looking at this, there are 3 high schools in our district, traditional. Bedingfield on average has 684 students, Fike is at 1062, and Hunt's at 1069. This is looking around the first month of school. It may vary some here or there, but that is out of balance. And I can't tell you to do it any more than I'm telling you now to suggest to do it, but I really think that now would be a good time while we're dealing with some of the construction at the elementary schools and looking at our other facilities, that as we're working through these things, there's 3 schools that is not a difficult logistical puzzle to do. It is a difficult process to go through as a board and as a community, no doubt about it, but this is out of balance.
The Bedingfield number, is that
That is,
once Watt is moved, or
that
is
is
that?
without Watt.
That is without
That is
Watt.
without Watt. And so, I think this is something that the board needs to address. This could be looked at for the 24-25 school year, and you could even go ahead and start thinking about the grandfather option for your upperclassmen, and that's been done in the past. I will tell you that Dr. Williams and I have looked at and have software that I've used in the past for reassignment and redistricting for us to have the ability to do a process like this without having to outsource it. And we are also, I'm not saying that needs to be the answer, I'm just saying that exists. But also, Dr. Williams has worked with TIMS or the state and the county planning offices to unify all of our maps. That should be done around January or so. Christmas break, so that every map through the entities that we work with will be up to date and aligned with what we use and what they use. So there'll be one picture of what the county maps are that we will be working from. So that's why we waited before we brought some things to you, because we're doing the prelim work to have all that ready so that we're actually looking at up-to-date current maps from each of our components that you would ask questions about, so they would all be unified and accurate. So that process we could start looking at our data and plan on that for the following year and give everyone ample time. But this is affecting not only instruction and allotments, but athletics and recruitment, retention. If you think about how we're trying to do things everywhere we go, it is difficult to balance all these things out without some balance among our high schools.
What would be the ideal numbers that we would be shooting for those 3 high schools?
I'm not sure yet, because I think the first question is that where the board wants to go, and would be related to how we may use some of the space, which I've got next in the presentation
Okay.
for you to consider, because that will also be a part of your planning process for the student assignment. But I do think it's time to do that from my viewpoint for the school system, as we look at those schools and the catchment areas. Okay?
All right.
So if the board was interested in doing that, and again, I think now is the time to begin, we could do preliminary work in the spring, and then you could have time to look at your data and get another set of data from the start of the school year, so you'd have 2 scenarios after changes are made with Watt moving, and still have plenty of time to work with families and any issues that we might run into from a logistics standpoint, which would be minimal. But there'll be plenty of time for notification and planning for everyone involved. But I really think we need to do that.
Comments or questions, board members?
Uh,
Mr. Mercer?
Not really a question, comment. I was here when it was looked at before, and it's a very difficult task. It's difficult on the board, it's difficult on the communities involved. And it's very challenging if we attempt to preserve any kind of resemblance to a feeder system
Yeah,
that's, that's kind of consistent
yeah.
across the board. And while we may have to meet the challenge, I'm not particularly looking forward to it, but as the will of the board, I'll jump right in there and try to do my part.
We know that it's always very emotional anytime we start talking about moving students and families and traditions and whose families have gone where for generations. And we heard some of the emotionality as we began to talk about the closure of our schools. And so it's never an easy task, but I don't think any task we undertake on the board is easy. There's always going to be some who are in agreement with whatever we do and some who will not be in agreement. But when the county commissioners tell us that we have to look at the utilization, that's part of that whole equation in the utilization of our space. in making sure that we have the best placement, and that we can get the number of teachers and the allotments that we need in order to make our classes successful. So,
Related to that is, I've shared just for the board's information, the ORID forecast is not too far off if we look at where we are and what the pattern will be over time. But in terms of capacity, Beattyfield's at 58% capacity and Pike and Hunt are 84 and 93. So even as those numbers change over time, it shows you that issue's stable over time unless we address it. So I don't think our forecast was too far off, even though we had the pandemic in there, which has thrown some of those projections a little bit wonky at times.
as we begin this whole discussion, one of the things that we had to look at was the housing patterns and the shifts and the new constructions and all that were going on. Are those things being factored into the number projections that we're being given?
In terms of these numbers, no, because this is just strictly an attendance zone issue.
Okay.
I mean, and the boundaries are so large for these three high schools. If you think about what the enrollment forecasting would be, they cover so much of 3 slices of the pie for our entire district. It would be spread out across enough of a sample. I don't think that's going to throw one out of whack. But you certainly could argue that you could leave a little bit of space, say on the Raleigh side, or Wake County side of things, which you have none really right now for growth on that side because everything's so out of balance. So anything you did right now would do nothing but give you some wiggle room for any of the growth opportunities because it is completely out of balance, in my opinion. If
Ms.
that makes
Barnes?
sense.
Okay.
I'm just sitting here thinking, I live East Wilson, and the construction for FedEx has just gone up. It's like overnight, here it is. And I've been hanging my hat on maybe a subdivision somewhere out there that may help the attendance zone at Bentonville. I'm not sure that it will,
Yeah.
and of course, Stanford Elementary and those other schools, but
We've got time to take that into consideration, but I think the first step is we need to commit to doing it.
do something now.
And I don't know that housing patterns, because this has been a pattern over time regardless of the patterns we've seen. So I don't think housing patterns across 3 of your high schools are really gonna be the issue. They're gonna cause you pinch points. Unlike what you'd see now with 5 middle schools or the elementary school issues. That would be much tighter because there is less wiggle room.
I just had a question too. When the charter schools started their high schools, it doesn't appear that they pulled too many of our students away from at least Fight and Hunt. I'm not sure about Beddingfield. But
I think
just
that's
wanted
been
to-
more of a, just a period of time because of the, maybe some of the housing patterns or just some of the general catchment area of the district where there's been some development. When we've looked at charter school numbers over time, ebb and flow in and out, it's been a wash before the pandemic. Now, we haven't gone back because really the patterns are so hard to predict right now. I don't know if I would look at a whole lot right yet. You also have to remember for high schools aren't typical to what we remember high schools being because students are online at community college courses, or they're online somewhere else, or they're coming in from one class and leaving, going somewhere. So there's a lot more capacity at our buildings. That's probably why you don't hear as much about some of the crowding, but there is crowding. And there is a limit to what you want to do. And I still think that needs to be addressed.
All right.
Okay?
Just want to make
Oh,
sure.
Ms.
Yes,
Powell?
ma'am.
Thank you. You gotta understand, so by the year 24, 25, we need to determine, looking at the boundaries, our attendance of boundaries, as far as the attendance for our 3 high schools, what we're going to plan to do.
I think we could, there's no reason why we could not redo the student assignment boundary zones for the 3 high schools and have them in place for the 24-25 school year.
25 school year.
So it's almost 23 now, so then we would go next year to go through a new set of data, look at all the housing information I know you want to look at, and give a families an entire year to plan for. It does not take an entire year to do the process. We're waiting on data for our maps. So if we had map data already ready, we could do it sooner, but I don't think the board likes, you want to do it within 1 semester. So that's why I've waited 1 more year. And I think that also you're moving Watt right at it at the same time too, so we need to talk about that process too. So that would be a fixed date, but also a gradual outcome for families.
It's 2023 is when our new Watt building will be completed, and
Mhm.
then 2024.
We- I wouldn't, I can foresee that if 23, 24 was what the board wanted to do, that would not be an issue either way. It could be ready by August of 23, 24. But we've got to get the data and go in and have the public information and prepare everybody and do that between January and probably June. And I didn't think that was the timeline the board wanted to particularly go with your 3 high schools.
And then we said grandfather option 11th and 12th graders, so we're looking at the 11th and 12th graders.
You could provide the option. I think one thing the boards usually bring up is, what about 11th and 12th graders that want to graduate with the school they started?
So it started.
And you could manage the space difference for them to go through 11th and 12th grade for a year and a half, 2 years to get through that process. But 23, 24 is doable, but it would be very, very tight, and I don't think that's what the board wants to do with your past work with families in the community to make sure everyone has ample time to plan.
I like the fact that you're saying even ample time to plan.
Yes, 24, 25 is extremely generous to go through and make sure everyone understands and go through the data and look at your data after moving Watt and after any new housing starts and even after pandemic 2 years gone from the reactions we've seen from that. So I think that's completely doable, easily. Still very difficult, still very charged, but that's a good timeline to be ready to do things.
All right.
Okay. One part of the discussion I mentioned earlier was the existing Watt that's inside of Bedingfield right now would be part of the discussion for when you were looking at if you were looking at attendance lines for that school's boundaries. But you've got space inside Bedingfield that would serve additional capacity for the redistricting of their attendance zone. And I've got some floor layouts for you, but there's some things I think that the board needs to decide because you're going to be approached about them. I think you have had the discussion and everyone has been very supportive from the board's perspective about esports, and so we're looking at 2 larger classrooms in the existing Watt being used for that, and we talked to the leadership of the school about that as well. So that's certainly manageable, and we can roll with that. But I also think that there has been discussion informally about the relocation of WASH inside Bedingfield, because as it is right now, it is in the mobile unit. And that mobile unit is ours. That was given to us by the county, so there's no issue with that. It would require some minimal renovations, but we've done some preliminary work to see what those would be, and that could work. And you could also already readily have a separate entrance with safety features and a reception area where folks would not be able to walk through the building and the rest of the campus. And again, you'd have it labeled and covered entrance for the WASH clinic inside, as we do with the other high schools.
So, esports being located in 2 large classrooms. I'm not understanding. First, if you'll tell us what this red enclosure is.
Okay.
That's the current what?
Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead and come back, because all the, y'all are just, take a map and y'all running on me. All
Okay, well, let me just go back to your chart then.
right, hold on.
And not make you have to jump ahead.
No, I
and
got
come
it right
back.
here. So what Dr. Finch is talking about is I took the floor plan for Beddingfield, okay? The red dot is the front of the school. Didn't I do good? I put the direction up there for everybody.
You are here.
That's the front of the school, is the red dot? Okay.
Because I knew somebody would say, like Mr. Breen, for instance,
This red dot,
don't start.
okay.
Joy kill.
Near the entrance?
And on the right-hand side, Mr. Breen,
Oh, thank you.
in red is wash.
Is
Watt.
wash,
No kidding.
Watt.
It's what.
that's what I
Let's see if
thought.
Dr. Finch listens. It's what? And what I'm talking about with wash is in the upper right corner with those first couple classrooms on your right as you come in, what as we know it now.
So that's
That
classroom
becomes-
The
7.
far right of that rectangle,
That becomes wash.
that could be wash. Because again, you've got a separate gated entrance once you come in right as the door. And then that reception area for what could be your reception area for wash, and then you've got 2 bigger rooms right there that could serve as your wash clinic. The rest of that area could be space for Beddingfield. Okay,
Okay,
and we'll go back.
so where in this diagram, this map, are you locating esports? And I know that,
Right now, we would consider, and again, none of this is written in stone.
yes,
But if you see right there in the middle of the bottom of the, go to the next page, Dr. Fitch, or so you can see it a little bit. I blew it up. All right, there you go.
Where's the front of the building?
Shut up, Mr. Breen. You're an awful person.
Is that side the hallway? Is that
Shush,
side the hallway
shush,
zone?
shush. See right there at the bottom of the rectangle where it says CC? All right? Don't ask me what it means, it doesn't matter what it means. That classroom on the left and the right of that line with a dot that says CC could serve as esports. Or we could go to the ones to the right of that. Classroom 1002, classroom 760. The only problem is all those numbers are not room numbers, they're square footage. So don't try and think they're room numbers because you're gonna go, why are they all 760?
right.
You
Okay,
know why? Because I've done that. It doesn't make sense. So somewhere along that hallway, we can put the esports lab.
okay, so that's the lab, but we would still have, computer capability for the other components, because
Yes.
as explained to us at our last meeting, and the update that was provided,
Mhm.
we're going to introduce the esports initially through, Teams,
Yes, ma'am.
and beginning in the spring semester, there would be the beginning classes.
Yes, ma'am.
But as we look at the esports and gaming whole concept, it's not just the game's creation, but it's going to be possibly other things such as cybersecurity and other
We can handle those through
pathways.
classroom
Okay,
space.
through regular classroom
Mhm.
space.
We're just
Okay.
denoting where we would put any additional power if we needed it,
Okay.
or additional space, and footnoting that that's where we would make sure that it would handle the heat and everything
Okay.
else that we would need there,
Okay,
okay?
all right.
And then the other topic that we had conversation about is We could also look at the relocation and renovation of the culinary arts program on the front side of this wing where the existing what is, because you would have separate entrances for delivery and shuttling out of food. From the renovation standpoint, that's manageable. And we could look at cafe, we could look at kitchen, we could look at everything, because that is an extremely successful and popular program. And it could also be something for employment for our students and funds. Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm sorry, Ms. Barnes?
My
go ahead.
question was the number of students enrolled in the culinary program. Do you have any idea?
I have not looked at that, but that is a successful program, and when we talked about it, that will be one that has been sustained over time. And I think that's one that could also be a communication, a collaboration with community college with their culinary arts program as well.
That sounds good, because I was mentioning last week, some of the, one in Wake County, they have a early college
Mhm.
culinary arts program.
Yes.
And that's why I was asking how many students, and could it become,
If you think about it, you've got an entrance down on the end that will be washed, so you don't want to go there, but you've
Right.
got a door right there at the bottom beside that far left rectangle that could be handled to go in and out as well as through the media center, but all those are things we could work out, but right now, that area is way back up up near across from the art classroom. Now, it is near the bus lot,
Right.
but it's kind of tucked away, and you don't want people walking through your building to go to that, and it would be a good use of the program and the process to do that.
Well, they have operated for a while in such confined space and done an
It is.
an excellent job. My question is, if the culinary arts program has an in-school cafe, would that be in competition with our regular food service
Well-
program? And,
You're asking me way more questions than I'm gonna have answers for. And
Well-
I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm never gonna lie to you. I'm not prepared to answer all those. I'm just telling you what
That's-
could be done once we explore all things. But would be a good use of the space that could serve as a successful program that's been maintained over time and possibly be a draw as other programs have been draws in other areas for Bedingfield as we look at sharing programs. So, no, we haven't looked at that. I'm sure Ms. Nair would probably want to have my head on a platter, so to speak, if it is, and we won't do anything that would jeopardize any of our funding. But I've got to believe there's some way to do some of these things if we want to, and it would help our students be employable when they leave. To me, it just makes sense. But again, I've made plenty of mistakes, so we're not that far along.
Okay.
But I just wanted to tell you, there are things we can do with that existing space, no problem.
well, as long as you let us know, we haven't
Oh,
worked
yeah,
out
no,
the
you gotta
kinks
approve
and whatever.
everything
Yes.
anyway. This is just
Okay.
first dibs.
But I think that offering catering to the community
There's some things
gives
that could be
them-
done.
Yes,
But I do think the board's gonna have to discuss about the wash clinic inside the building.
so for down the road thought, have you begun to think about if that happens and you move wash from the mobile unit to in-building, in-house, are there plans being considered, or have you begun to think about how you would utilize
The mobile unit,
the mobile unit?
we don't have to utilize mobile unit, but I still got the wheels for it so we can move it.
Okay,
That's all I was worried about.
okay. Well,
But
we did more
we
than.
have it, we have it.
did more than
for-
wheels because we had to do
Oh, we have to
pads
take
and-
all, yes,
And
ma'am.
all of that, and plumbing had
But
to
it
be
served its
rerun.
purpose and
Yes.
it's been a good one, but for that. But this would be ideal and would be a much safer, install over time because it's inside a building and it's what we've got at our other schools.
Okay.
So, and I think that's what the Health Department and Healthcare Foundation are striving for elsewhere also, but no, we don't have a plan for the mobile unit. Right now, we don't have the capacity issues, but there are some things we could repurpose it for.
All right.
We're not out anything by doing that.
Any other questions regarding the existing lot? Okay, if
Okay?
you want to move to the next
Yes, ma'am.
issue.
Your conversation with the commissioners was clear that their support for a second new elementary school, and that was based on continued work by the board for facility utilization. And so, the important piece about this is that there's no reason why you can't begin this process while Frederick Douglass is underway. It doesn't have to be start, finish. A linear process is a big concurrent process. So I think that if this is the case, then we need to consider another elementary school and determine where and purchase land and get going. So that could begin right away. A possibility that the board could consider is the area between Gardner's and Stantonsburg. And they could serve those areas as well as parts of East Wilson. Those schools are in need of some repairs
Yes.
and renovations. And I think what the commissioners have said is, if you're gonna do the renovations and repairs, but it makes sense to look at a newer school, can you combine those and get a newer school that's gonna last longer, be more efficient over time? I do not have an idea where the site should be. That is not my gift. And I think that's gonna take some discussion and some other things to take place. However, if you look at what we need to do at Gardner's and Stantonsburg before we spend that money, I think we should spend the money on some land and plan. And again, this could get done quicker. These are pictures from the cafeteria at Stantonsburg. This is water. It needs a roof. Okay? It's also gonna need a roof on that gym. Rough back of the napkin estimates would be around $4 million to do all that probably. Because the windows need to be replaced. So that's pretty significant.
Would the gym be torn down, Dr. Mills,
Well,
eventually, or?
they're not ideal,
Keeper.
but again, if we're building a new school, this could be purchased by someone else and repurposed for something else. But do we want to put a new roof on this and replace all those windows? That's the decision the board's gonna need to make. Gardner's has a very similar gym and needs a roof, and those are costly. It's also got some other pieces. It doesn't need a roof on the cafeteria. We've done some patchwork out there. But between those two schools and those projects, you're getting into millions of dollars to do some things that are important. But I would suggest that the commissioners have told you, where do you want to spend your monies, and we're supportive of doing this. Bring us a plan. So I think that's this school area. One thing that you would want to look at and talk about is it may not require as much capacity as some other areas. Or maybe it will, I don't know, because you've not had the growth and you don't see that, but you do have the FedEx over there, as Ms. Barnes mentioned, and some other things. But now will be the time to do it before we really do run into some issues with roofs, which are major, and you know those are the first things we attack, and windows, which are costly from an efficiency standpoint and just availability standpoint. That's the hard part right now, is just getting them. Now, I can't show you the school district lines on the county GIS map because they don't exist right now because they pulled them down because we're updating them. So I apologize. And based on Mr. Breen's comment about my red dot, I'm glad I didn't draw anything on there either.
Where's the front of that?
Shush. Shush.
It's near the dot.
Oh, thank you.
You're an evil man.
Dr. Mills.
Yes, sir.
I don't disagree with anything you said, but,
It'd be fine if you did.
well, I know, but, I'm afraid to. I don't want to get hurt.
Sure.
No, but something in my mind goes back, and it was not the schools, but it was part of the county government and their idea of expansion. Years ago, stepped out, and to get ahead of it, they purchased land or bargained for it. And then there was such a public outcry as to what the plan was, they had to nix the plan and do something else. And I guess all that's to say, I think we need to go ahead and look at finding the land and starting the process. But we need to make sure that our plan's not gonna meet such, disapproval that we get locked into something that we wound up not wanting to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think you've got two schools that are loved and supported by their communities. And you've got three distinct areas that are large geographic areas without a lot of density. So no matter where it is, there's gonna be some travel no matter what you do. But maintaining two older schools that need roofs and windows versus having one centralized that's, like you just went through Watt and it's beautiful and everything's flexible and up to date and maintainable. I mean, this is the time to go back to the commissioners and that's what they were saying to do. So if we can get the land and lay that out, then every community is gonna have a say in that. And it's not to say they won't be sad that, I mean, I love those schools, they're neat. But they're not gonna last us forever without putting significant amounts of money in them. And the commissioners are telling you, we want to purchase a newer school, tell us what you need, and that would be that's hard to justify how you couldn't build a case for that, because you got two right there, right in between each other. You're dead between them. So, I think, we need to, if that's of interest to the board, and I think it is, because of the conversations that you've had and the conversations you've had with the commissioners, I think we need to move quickly, because this can run concurrently again with current construction. And based on what we were looking at, again, your utilization is fine, but that could be done, and students can remain at those schools while it's being constructed. No one's displaced during the construction time period. Students stay at Gardner, students stay at Stanford. They stay right there until it's all done. So there's no displacement until everything is over and done and people can plan for it.
Dr. Mills, what kind of time frame are you looking at on that?
Well, I think first is, if that's the next step, then we need to go and talk about the where, and look at possibilities, and then talk to the commissioners about, are you in support of purchasing land and floating funds for a school for that? Because that would be your second new elementary school. But I think they would be in favor of that, because if you look at it, it makes sense. It's right up the lines of what y'all were talking about. Do those schools need significant renovations? Yes. Would they allow you to reduce the number of schools that you have? Yes. Would allow you to replace them with a more efficient school that could serve the same populations in any growth? Yes. And it's not in an area where you can't get land. Not yet. Do you have infrastructure out there? Yes. I mean, all those things are there. So I think that would be a good conversation, and I would have it sooner than later.
So, because this is a work session, if we wanted to move forward, then this would be on our agenda for the November meeting.
I could put it on the agenda for the November meeting. I can have conversations ahead of time to say this is what we're working on and what else will we need. Because basically what they said was if you bring us a proposal, we could even talk to the architects about the cost per square foot for a general elementary school. They did that recently with some other things. I mean, and we can begin working with anybody, whoever it is, about, you know, centralized parts of the county in that area that would be on a map just to look, or areas that make sense. I don't know. But that's, sooner we go, sooner we would be able to start.
If we looked at that combination for Stantonsburg and for Gardner's, and they currently are at,
About 186 and was it 219? Right, so that's what, 4 something?
okay.
You could include a pre-K center out there on that side of the county. More than one, you need one on that side. So you can add that, and that capacity is just fine. No one's gonna argue with that, that's needed. It would be great for families to have that on that side of the county. Because there's nothing that people aren't bringing their children into right now from there for our services as well. That'd be great.
Comments, questions? Board members?
I'm excited, I'm ready to move. I know we're not voting on anything, but.
Okay. Let's just take a look
Mr.
at it.
Morgan, what kind of, y'all know when I only hear certain voices, you know I'm gonna go around and try to involve all of you, because it's not a one-person decision. And one person does not a discussion make. So let's hear your feelings, please, and I'll start this time on my right. So, Ms. Powell?
Well, as we were talking, I was reflecting back and listening to, there was one lady that said she enjoyed hearing the children in the neighborhood playing. That was at Stantonsburg Elementary. Enjoyed hearing the children down the street, and within a community, you know, that's something that gives life to the neighborhood, gives life to the environment. And then I'm thinking on the other hand, it would be nice to have a very nice school. And to my despair, when I look at these pictures, I'm really shocked at the conditions that our schools are in. But then when I look at the gym, I said, wow, the gym looks fantastic.
Because we just painted some of it, it'll look good for a little bit, but it'll peel off.
Yeah, but to my, you know, to look at the conditions, it saddens me. And as anyone else, I'd love to have a new school, new facility. But then I think about how it would affect our communities and affect the people in that area. Gardner's and Stantonsburg, those are the two closest schools, but then I'm trying to reflect, and I'm not familiar with the area, trying to think of where a school would possibly be placed. So, you know, I agree that we should leave the students at the schools while we're trying to build and decide on where we're going to place the school. And it does, again, I'm a little emotional about closing or changing situations with our parents and our students. I taught at Stantonsburg, as you all know. I'm not gonna go through all that spiel, and I enjoyed working at a small community school. Everyone was real tight, and you had that support, is what I like. But I do, on the other hand, think about having a new school, having a nice place for our students to attend, and having a nice facility that we can be proud of. And having the support of our county commissioners has been very, very, very nice. And having them come to our meetings, and we attend theirs too, actually bring this all together and be on one page, which is very important. So that's just some thoughts that I have going on in my head right now.
We're all gonna have these emotional issues that's gonna affect not only us, but the community members, and we've just gone through that, so we fully well understand, but when the communities want their students in a safe facility, and
Right.
we have to weigh all of the issues, so we thank you. Mr. Breen?
I know inevitably that the discussion's gonna be, well, if there's money to build new schools, why won't you just renovate what we have existing? And I think that that's a twofold issue. The first is that the county commissioners who control our capital funding have indicated that that is not the direction in which they wanna go. And the second part is that these older facilities are gonna require continued maintenance and increased upkeep. And I'm of the opinion that sometimes, in order to ensure the health of the plant, sometimes you gotta clip a couple roses off the bush. And if that's what we need to do to ensure that our system, our public school system can continue to grow and proliferate, then that's what we need to do.
Mr. Mercer?
Yeah, he said it the exact way I was going to. Now, of course, I chastise him. By nature and necessity, he's much better versed than I am, but I too have concerns about the impact it'll have on the families and so forth. I also, if we're doing that, those people that live on the edges of their district, that would put them, like the students that are about the same distance now from Stantonsburg as they are from Lee Woodard, is going to put them that much further, be going much further to go to school. And if that would be something we might look at, but I agree that we're much better off to build a new school and combine them. But I think we need to do a real good selling job to those two communities to get them on board as soon as we can. Or the, lack of a better term, the difficult conversations that go on through the whole process if we don't bring some kind of closure to that. But I'm not opposed to moving forward with it.
Mr. Borkin?
So, I mean, yeah, it's been touched a couple times. There's an emotional piece to it. You know, my mother's side of the family is from Stantonsburg, and I've spent a lot of time there. So Stantonsburg's a near and dear to my heart. But, yeah, the photos that we're looking at, I mean, they don't look good. And yeah, I'm in favor of putting new schools up for our students, for the retention of staff, for, I mean, everything that comes with it, for the investment in our community. I think that the timeframes are gonna be a big deal. I think whichever, way we go, I kind of fast forwarded a little bit and flipped through the pamphlet, and there's another option in there. But whatever is gonna get us a new facility on the ground quickest is the way that I think that we need to go. Because the economy's changing. There's a likelihood of, many changes coming in the future that might hinder this process. So I feel like we need to capitalize on it while we can. And I would also say that I don't think that we should look at it as one or the other, maybe so much as doing both and one just being stalled. Because the county commissioners indicated in our first meeting that in, I think it was 2025, Jones was gonna be paid for. So I think that we need to have a second project on the back burner for when that time comes. That way we can go ahead and keep the ball rolling on best serving our students and staff.
Okay. Ms. Barnes?
I was just gonna make a quick comment. I too taught at Stantonsburg. I was an academically gifted teacher, and my classroom was like in a little box, more or less a closet. And I mean, it's a beautiful atmosphere there. And I remember those same halls, same curtains. It's in more disarray than it was about 10 years or so ago. But I just feel like going to Vincent Bynum when we did the passing out of the books for the preface program, I saw happy children. And I know some of the children that I saw on the halls had to be some of the Winston School elementary students. And I didn't see any upset faces. And I just feel like it may sting for a while, but I do believe if we move forward and give a state-of-the-art facility to those children that live out in the Gardners and the Stansberg area and East Wilson, on the end, we'll have a good product and we'll have happy parents and students.
Ms. Boyette?
I too want us to see new facilities. To be honest, I would prefer looking ahead, proceeding with the Hearn Wells project for one, we might not have to acquire land, might be able to move quicker on it, we would impact more students. And yes, I personally and professionally believe they need a new school at Stantonsburg and Gardners, but the resistance that we got to that, I would hesitate. I would say if we've got somewhere that we could go ahead and move forward and impact a large number of kids, students, and get a brand-new facility like that one we have at Watt now, I mean, that's just amazing. That would be my preference.
When you talk about the resistance that we received when we started the whole conversation with closures and whatever, I think sometimes there was a misconception that would close, but in both of these scenarios, and yes, there is closure, but there is consolidation that would allow those two communities with whichever of the scenarios. And yes, I had looked ahead too, and I saw, okay, there's an option here. I think it's a matter of the awareness and knowing that we're not looking to get rid of your space per se, but to make it better. And, you know, Gardners and Stantonsburg are the outliers, and I think sometimes people feel that, you know, they're the stepchildren or they haven't been as well looked after. So I think that as we continue to have these conversations and move forward, we do have options that we possibly did not have before. And that, so as the community sees that we are looking to make things better for their students, for their communities and the like, maybe the conversations coming will be a little different this time. And to be able to see that the transfer occurred fairly seamlessly with the short time that we had as we made the closure of Winston. And in that whole discussion, it was not, can we consolidate it, but it was more like a closure where the conversation that's growing out of this seems to be more, well, we're going to consolidate and put the two together, and that may be a little more palatable. But we have to, first and foremost, hear what our county commissioners have been saying to us, and that is what we are doing. And they say they want good-looking facilities that people will want to and be happy to be in attendance at. And we have to continue to be the good stewards of the funding. And if they're saying we're ready to build your buildings, we cannot overlook that fact. And there's always going to be emotion, whether you're replacing a school, whether you're changing school lines, attendance zones. It's an emotional time all the way around. So I'm hearing a consensus that, yes, we need to go ahead and begin this whole process. And having land already accessible, I hear you, Mrs. Boyette. You know, that was one of the good things that we had about Elm City, was that we didn't have to go out and secure land. And that's allowing us to begin to have that discussion and move that forward at a quicker pace. If that is the process that we go through, when we look at the scenario that Dr. Mills hasn't even talked about, but that we read, and reading
Get to it.
ahead,
Got some
of
reading ahead folks
combining
today.
Hearn and Wells, and the property's already there, then that's another quicker process than having to go out and find land, negotiate, buy, and all of that. So we have some options that are available to us. But the one consensus that I'm hearing is, let's move forward. And let's see about this second school, following Frederick Douglass. And one of the things in the slides that Dr. Mills and administration are presenting is, let's not wait until one project is over to begin the whole process for the next, because then that does slow us down and that changes the whole momentum. So I'm hearing, yes, let's go forward and build. We're not taking any action today because this is a work session, but Dr. Mills has indicated that this can be added to our agenda for our November meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
And is that agreeable with everybody, that they move forward and give us this presentation? Okay. So I'll let you now pick up wherever you want to pick
All right,
up.
I'm
and
gonna,
move
I'm gonna move ahead since everybody's moved ahead of me. All right, so, all you smart
what-
people.
that's what happens
skip
when
ahead.
you
Here we
give
go. I
people,
give y'all the handouts. I knew
material.
better.
Yeah,
I knew better. I
yeah,
did
yeah,
anyway.
Yeah.
So here's another possibility. Now, the elementary utilization again, we could combine Hearn and Wells into an expanded Wells elementary site. It doesn't have to be, don't worry about names, but those sites could be combined. The issue with that would be that that work would have to wait until Toys Not is available to relocate the students out of Wells, depending on how the work is structured, because Frederick Douglass students will be in there while that work is being done. So this could be done all concurrently as the one we were just talking about with the school that would be somewhere with Gardner's and Stantonburg and then that side of the county. But you've got 16, a little over 16 acres where Wells is situated right now. And again, don't say anything, Mr. Breen, there's 2 dots on this map. That's the best I could do. That was the best I could do. This is Google Maps, this is terrible to deal with. But you can already see they're that close together as it is. And there is no room for any change at Hearn. They are landlocked, stuck. It's probably maybe even 3-4 acres, what we figured out being on their footprint right there for both lots with the parking. So the Wells lot has Barton College fields around it. You've got plenty of space. You've got some newer construction there that was done when I was here before with the classrooms and the media center on that wing that have been done. So that would be components that you may not have to address. But that land is right where you need it, right in the middle of town, and you don't have to purchase it. And where you would relocate students to during the construction is at the end of the road. So you're not talking about a major disruption for families or buses or anything else when you do it. Hearn could stay right where they are while you do it, but the Wells students would need to be moved out while that construction takes place. And it could be done in phases most likely. But that whole back play area, again, the footprint on that would be kind of one you'd have to look at, and the architect's about to do, but I would like for us to go ahead and get some possibilities to know what's available, because you're never gonna get that much land in Wilson right downtown where you need it anymore, right off Nash Street. You got the college right down the street from Hearn. So all that area is, you know, the changing of the catchment areas and boundary zones for all that, transportation and so forth, would be very, very easy to do in terms of logistics. Again, 2 schools going into 1 is change, but you're talking about a new facility on a footprint that you know in the area, in the heart of Wilson, if you think about it, right off of Nash Street. That's pretty strong for an area where you know it's consistent population every time. And you could look at a pre-K center there as well, which will be centralized. So I took the footprints for those schools, and as you can see, Hearn is really choppy as you go through it. I mean, it's got pods off of it, and that footprint is really compressed. And then Wells, the bottom right-hand side from the media center and those 5th grade classrooms and some resource rooms, music and art, that's all new construction in about 98. So you've got room to go out and around with that from the construction. Yes, sir.
Assuming that the capacity of Toys Not's about the same as what Darden is, because they're pretty much the same school.
Pretty
aren't they?
similar.
Could we
Really?
not have both schools attending Toys Not at the same time?
Well, you've got the technology services in there right in the middle right now, because we had to get it out of Darden to get that capacity up to combine the Toys Not students there. And we've got a few other ancillary programs. We'd have to look and see. I don't know.
And if there was any overflow, maybe put a couple trailers.
That would be
Sorry.
something we could look at, and also we'd have to see what everybody's tolerance level of that is, if the cafeteria can handle it and all the other kinds of things, but
Is
we
that,
could.
is that on an interim basis or for?
Just temporarily
Just a temporary.
until they got back into their
Mhm.
newly built schools.
Again,
Yes.
I'm not coming prepared to address all that, so don't go too deep with me, but we could look at that prior to the meeting, and Greg and others could,
If that's something that could be done, this could be expedited
yes,
with us already having the land.
yes.
And-
No, that could, but again, they're gonna be in there from Frederick Douglass for the time being. Frederick Douglass is gonna be there now, so you'd have to check for those 2, but yeah.
That would have us ready to apply for a Needs More Space grant fairly quickly also.
But I can explore that before the board meeting, without a doubt. I mean, that campus is right down the street, and there's lots of, but again, the first thing I need to know from the board is that of interest? And I think that will allow you to do, you've got several options to do some things quicker, that would still address needs and get new facilities.
That would be my preference to start.
So are you saying, look at a Wells, Hearn configuration before you look at a?
That would be
at a
my
Stantonsburg
preference, because we
Gardens?
already have the land and we could apply for a grant almost immediately.
If we can gather more information before we, more information about the options. I think you've selected some good options. But if we're going to select one of them, if we could have,
I'll get some questions answered for you, and we'll bring some more back if you think anything in between, if you'll let me know. but there'll be some things we have to know more exact, but yeah, we can find those out between now and then, sure.
I just wanted to get some clarification. You talked about putting Frederick Douglass and Wells together while we work on a Wells Hearn program
Put Frederick Douglass and Wells in
into Toys.
Toys Not temporarily while their projects are underway.
My only concern would be, I need to know what the prospective impact on faculty and administration would be if we did that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Major.
I'm not gonna be able to tell you that in a week.
Because that's what, that becomes the albatross for me. It's not, I know that as far as a numbers game, we could probably get everybody in there, but I've got a tough time saying, what are our folks gonna do in the interim while we consolidate and wait for 2 sites to be built?
What do you mean, which folks?
Well, teachers and TAs.
Well, they would just go with the classes over.
You would hope, if there was
I would-
adequate space for that.
You're gonna have some duplicate
'Cause you're gonna-
services, and you're gonna have some duplicate, spaces, and then some lost spaces.
Because it's not a completely fungible swap.
It's, there's a math issue, but there's a logistical issue, and then there's a people issue. And all those are very, very difficult all at once. But, I mean, we can look at all those things, but first would be just a sheer numbers issue and scheduling issue and access issue. But
I,
I'm gonna have a look.
I think that the number of people
Those are
could
pretty
be
big.
accommodated as far as students. But I too have some question when you know, for example, principals are used to managing their building kind of thing. Then you have 2 principals managing the same building. And then you have 2 sets of buses with 1 bus parking lot. Well, you could use, I don't know if you could use the parking lot on one end, the end of the 7th grade wing that was there as a bus parking lot. That's a lot to figure out.
How about let me just do some basic math before we go too far down the path?
I should say before we go too deep in the rabbit hole.
We already there.
Moving right along, let me see what else I got on
Where's the
my
front,
budget.
where's the front entrance?
Shut, but I will come back with some more information.
Okay.
How's that?
So this second option would be instead of building a new school that would accommodate.
I think that's what y'all were saying. Now,
That's not what
I think we
y'all
could do
need to
this
say-
while
No,
we
no,
search
no,
for
no, no,
land
no, I don't-
out in the county.
y'all need to say
Are you-
something at our next meeting, because this is a work session, but y'all need to talk about that.
I think we should do this while we search for a site out in the county to accommodate the Gardners and Stantonsburg populations. And that would be my preference.
I'd kind of like to get as much information as we can. Things that, you know, that go much deeper than, we're able to discuss right now.
So what I may be hearing the board say is we need a pros and a cons for why you should go with one versus the other, with the plan of Hearn Wells versus Gardner's Stantonsburg. Am I hearing correctly? No?
No, pros and cons are not the issue. I think the issue is the board's desire to have 2 projects, because both of these can be done, if one can be done with the, I first need to check on this last thing with space.
Okay, well,
But you've got to decide as a board whether or not you even want to entertain the notion of a new school in lieu of existing Gardners and Stantonsburg to replace those schools
Right.
over time. Now, that's not clear among the board. from what I'm hearing. Then we've got the issues about Wells and Hearn, which can't run concurrently with Frederick Douglass unless we can make sure there's space and everyone gets along and all those things can work and all the timing and everything else. But the other question is separate from that.
Okay.
It's not pros or cons, it's the board's will and desire to do that
Okay,
separately.
well, you know, when we met with the county commissioners and we kept inching the numbers up and say, oh, well, it's gonna be 2 schools or 3.
Yeah.
You know, Frederick Douglass is already in the works, in the plan, so are you telling us 2 more schools or 1 more schools? And, you know, they kind of chuckled, so, we do have to decide which it is, so.
And it may be that if, depending on what we bring back, that can or can't be an issue. That could be the next step after you do the other, because you have to wait for space to be available to relocate students.
Yes.
But that still doesn't answer your question about what's the board's intent about a school between Gardner's and Stansburg's zones, if you will, in those communities. And that's another conversation you need to have at the regular scheduled meeting for action or non-action.
Okay.
So, all this is information at this point, and you bring up really good points, but you've got some more difficult decisions to make as we get closer to it, because
It'd be
these.
a lot easier if the county commissioners said they'd build us an additional,
No,
more
I'm saying-
new
Additional 2 more
schools.
schools.
Just throwing that out there.
All right, next.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. I've just put this out there, this one is, doesn't need a lot of discussion, but Daniels Learning Center, I think is something we need to take a look at. And I brought this up before, but if we could get support for reassigning it to the current Winstead that we've closed, or at some point when we're all done with Toys Not from a growth standpoint, from a building standpoint, we need to make our way out of Daniels Learning Center and that facility. And we could move the print shop and get out of that building, because it is not efficient for us to maintain and heat and cool that building over time. I mean, it is expensive. And I think that we need to come up with a plan for that. And if, you know, the Winstead building, the commissioners want us to reduce our footprint and reduce our number of schools, so we've closed Winstead. And I understand that, but if we were to get rid of the 2-story section, we could move Daniels into that section and reduce our costs for maintaining Daniels. But we don't have to do that. I'm just saying, somewhere in the next several years, sooner the better, we need to do something with that location, because it is not going to be a good investment over time to stay in that building, because it is cost prohibitive to heat and cool that building. And we need to, we don't have to talk about the day, you've been through a lot already, and I'm not saying to use Winstead, I think that's, again, you know, I don't want to get into that piece of it, I'm just putting that, be thinking, but when Toys Not is free, even if we look at something else and other processes for it, we need to get out of that building soon.
okay.
They just be on everybody's radar. And then finally, I just think from wrapping up, I still think we need to, as we get these decisions made, we need to go back to our other renovations throughout the district and talk about those. Because we need to plan for some of the bigger ones and get your input on those. So we don't need to wait. I think we need to have a bulleted hit list, if you will, of anything we want to do, and go ahead and get working on that. I do think we need to talk about athletic facilities over time. You heard some of that conversation at the county commissioners meeting. And I think there is still a need for a painting schedule and a furniture replacement and funding. As we reduce our footprint and do that, You know, yes, we're getting new furniture for new buildings, but we need to be painting our existing ones that we're gonna renovate or gonna keep. They're not getting painted. And the furniture replacement, I mean, that is extremely costly over time, and there's no way for us to continue to do that on a piecemeal basis. It's just drops in the bucket. And I do think that's worth having a conversation about. If the board's doing the work and gonna close schools and combine and consolidate and do this other work, I really think we should go back and talk about that from a plan standpoint of how do we go through and do that. Because that's very much needed in our schools. And last but not least, you need to tell me when we're gonna meet again, because we need to keep working on this. We got our meeting on the 21st, correct?
Our regular board meeting.
Regular board meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so at the 21st, bring your calendars, and we'll plan for the next one, but I will bring you information about several of the scenarios you brought up. And you can make some decisions then about next steps and where we go from there, and then we can set up our next meeting. And I'll be glad for input from you about what you might want to talk about next, if I missed something or we've missed something. But that's kind of the next big things I think we needed to do today.
Well,
Does that sound good?
the helpings have been heaped on the plate.
We've all got homework,
Yes, we do. So,
especially you.
please share your thoughts, comments, concerns, questions with Dr. Mills prior to our board meeting on the 21st. And I'm excited about the prospects of whichever becomes a new school. And in being able to present our thoughts to the county commissioners and whatever proposal so that they can do what we had discussion about. We present a proposal, they give us some money. Does not hurt to look at needs-based applications for what it is that we're gonna move forward with. And so stay tuned,
Yes, ma'am.
okay? Mrs. Barnes?
Madam Chair, I move that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mrs. Boyette, that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 6-0, that Mr. Breen is not in attendance. At this point, he had indicated that he had a 2-hour window, and that 2-hour window has been reached, so that at 6:30, he departed the meeting. Thank you. We are in closed session. Huh?
Go, girl, go. No, I'm good. No, it's dinner time. It's dark outside.
Yes, and don't forget, we do good daylight savings
Yeah.
time, that we fall back.
That's right. I brought you all some Halloween candy in the middle of the desk.
Well, thank you, thank you.